recognize the gentleman from Idaho for 5 minutes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ariola, thank you for the testimony, and welcome to the fight on the challenge to secure the southern border. New York's got some geography between it and the southern border, and so does my home state of Idaho. And like you, we are impacted as well. And in my state, our governor recently designated a National Fentanyl Awareness Day, as opioid-related deaths have nearly doubled in Idaho over the last decade. In 2022, there were 358 overdose deaths, and 50% of those was from fentanyl. From July to August of this year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized more than 25,500 pounds of fentanyl, compared with 12,800 pounds over the same period in 22. And just as a reminder, that's in Idaho. It's a fair distance from the southern border. But nevertheless, it's impacting us as well. I can only imagine the drastic impact on states closer in proximity. I have been to the southern border as well, and this is just a drastic situation that we've got to do something about. I do have a question for Mr. Hankinson. In your testimony, you pointed out 5 major ways in which illegal immigration hurts America. I would just want to ask, with your research and given the negative impacts of fentanyl, like in my state, what are some of the steps that we can take to try to deal with that crisis?
Well, one thing we could do is put the Border Patrol back on the border. And one of the reasons they're not there in large numbers is because they're being pulled off to do processing of illegal, inadmissible aliens who are then being moved into the rest of the country. So we need to address that flow. We know that about 85% of them are not going to qualify for asylum because they're here looking for a job, which you can't blame them for doing, but you can certainly ask them to wait their asylum process in Mexico under the migrant protection protocols, or in a country where they've previously gained asylum or protection right the way down through South America. And when we dismantled that and we accepted that every person asking to get in would be dealt with after they already were in the United States, we had to divert resources off the border. So one thing that could be done, a concrete thing, is to reinstate the migrant protection protocols and safe third country agreements and ways in which to process people outside the United States so that Border Patrol can get back to patrolling the border.
Thank you for that. And I shared with you, Mr. Hankinson, just a little snippet about some of the impacts we've seen in Idaho. And I know you've looked into this in depth. Are we unique, or you see similar ramifications in other local communities that have impacted other local communities?
Well, New York is obviously the biggest example, but across our big cities, Washington, D.C., there are over 1,000 people in Washington, D.C. shelters that are displacing people from Washington. There are tents all over this town. We've all seen them, including outside my apartment. There are 400 people living in Chicago Airport's bus terminal who are inadmissible aliens who've been let into the country, presumably to claim asylum at some point. Chicago is scrambling to figure out what to do with them all. El Paso has seen people released into its streets, sleeping on the sidewalks, more than, I think, 2 or 3 times since this crisis started. And then I was hearing yesterday that in Boise, there is a homeless population down by some sensitive areas in the river that used to be recreational grounds that everybody could enjoy. And the homeless populations all over the country are being exacerbated enormously by indigent illegal immigrants coming to the country who have to be taken care of by local communities.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I do have more questions, but I'm going to use the rest of my time just for a statement because Mr. Hankinson kind of covered a portion of the next question that I had. This is a result of this administration's policy. No more, no less. Not only is it critically unfair to Americans, This is horrifically bad for the immigrants. We legally immigrate more than every other nation in the world combined on an annual basis. To take the border and open it up, I would argue absolutely for political purposes, is a travesty. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you to the